Hello everybody and welcome to my review of the Shoei Hornet X2. Now before I get into this, I need to let you guys know how I got about to getting this helmet and why I'm reviewing it. I was approached on the internet by leatherup.com and they said, hey, we're going to give you stuff if you want to review it. And I normally don't do this stuff, but I said, hey, I will review your gear if you let me pick the gear I actually want. And they said, sure, you pick any kind of gear you actually want, you can keep it and review it. I'm like, that's a good deal. You know what I want? I actually want the Shoei Hornet X2. So that's what I'm wearing on my head. Now, I've been using this helmet for probably an hour in total. I've taken the highway, I've taken city streets, I've driven with the peak on and off. And while I don't think I am of any authority to rate or critique a helmet, because I'm not a professional in that way, I will tell you guys exactly what I think about it in the case you're looking for helmets to get or are interested in different helmets. So firstly, the reason I chose this helmet is because it's a Shoei. I've heard nothing but good things about Shoei. I also like the way this helmet looks. Now, to be completely honest, this is not my favorite looking helmet of all time. I still love the helmets I've made. But of the Shoeis that I got to look at, this is my favorite one. This helmet did not come with a smoked visor. I had to buy that and put it in myself, and I'll talk more about the visor later. So the very first thing I noticed about this helmet, and I'm trying to find the right words to describe it, but it felt like a solid environment. If you wear a helmet, you feel like, for me anyway, that it's your own ecosystem, like this is your space. And when I got in my space, I was like, aha, this home is solid. It feels solid. Now, this isn't the lightest helmet I've ever owned. In fact, I would say this helmet isn't heavy, but it's definitely a good medium to heavy weight. But the weight, I think, if this makes any sense, is where it should be. It's not like it's way on the exterior weighing you down one way or the other. It's well balanced, it feels sturdy, blocks out wind noise better than any of the helmets I've owned. That's also good. I love the visor mechanism. I was intimidated by it because when you put it together and look at the instructions, there's 3 pins per side that the mechanism locks with, and I thought it'd be difficult to change. It's actually very easy. You push a plastic pin on the side and it pops out. Same thing goes for the peak. The peak, another pro, is very easy to change and remove. Another pro is that the visor isn't covered by the peak, meaning you can change them independently. That's an especially big plus for me because I don't really care for peaks on helmets, and I'll get to that. Another big pro, and this is special specifically to me, is some of the Shoei helmets have a pin lock visor system, and basically what that is 2 plastic pins inside the visor that allow for a second layer insert, and what that second layer does is work as an anti-fog layer, and what it has is a silicone layer around it. When you put that against your visor, it encapsulates and traps air so that it doesn't fog up. Now, the weather isn't quite cold enough for it to be fogging regularly, but I've gotten it cold enough and breathed heavily on it to try to get fog to show up. It does not show up. I can barely see it in the corner of my eyes where the second visor doesn't exist, so I know that I'm actually creating fog and it's not getting in there. Something I'm wanting to find out over time is how well the interior is going to hold up, because the interior on my AGV is kind of degenerating. I heard that happens to those helmets. I've heard the interiors of Shoei's are especially good. Now, I can't say this is the most comfortable interior I've ever felt, but it certainly feels reliable, and only over time will I be able to tell if it's actually going to hold up. In the cons now, the biggest con that I'm going to have to point it towards is the peak. Now, I'm especially biased against peaks, I got to admit that, but I'll still let you know what I think. All of my helmets are dual sport helmets like this one. They've all had peaks, and I've taken them all off because 1, I think they look better without them, and 2, I don't care for them. But, that being said, this peak I don't think works as well as it should. I mean, maybe it's to be expected. The biggest problem is when you're at speed, and if you look up, it catches wind and pulls you back. That's kind of a duh. But the real problem is that if you are going fast enough, I think 45 plus, and you don't want to catch, you can't just look straight ahead. You have to look down a little bit, and then the air can pass through those vents and not catch. Otherwise, it'll start catching and pulling you up even when you're looking straight ahead. That's a problem. Another problem isn't the fact that the peak is in my field of vision. The problem is that I can't escape it if I'm driving in an aggressive position. So I'm leaning forward, my head is pointed down maybe 30 degrees. If I want to tuck, at some point I can't see in front of me because the peak actually gets in the way. This is a dual sport. I don't think it was designed for sport bikes. I should say aggressive super sport bikes like this. If you were sitting upright, it'd probably be okay. And if there was a lot of sun, maybe I'd want it, but I have a smoked visor that's going to be on all the time, so I don't have a need for it. The peak is actually really easy to take off, so I'm going to go ahead and take it off so you can see what the helmet's like before I go on with the rest of my thoughts on this helmet. Alright, so now you can see the helmet without the peak on it. It looks a lot more normal now. I just don't care for peaks, like I said, and I can feel the freedom. I can move. I mean, I could move before. The peak isn't going to immobilize you or pull your head in the wrong direction and just completely throw you off, but life without the peak is a lot better, in my opinion. At least if you're going to drive a sport bike like this. Now, while I'm still on about the peak, when I was using the peak and on the highway, looking up obviously caught my head and pulled it up, but also looking to the side, going 45 or 90 degrees in either direction would pull my head to the side. That was annoying. If I turned more than 90 degrees and looked over my shoulder, it was fine, but if I kind of glanced on the highway, I'd start getting tugged, and I did not expect the peak to do that. Honestly, I thought the peak would, for some reason, hold up against it, but it didn't. Kind of disappointed, but I guess I don't really care because I don't plan to use it. I should have mentioned that this helmet has, I believe, only 3 vent switches. There's one here on the chin, there's one here on the brow, and there's one up here on top. The con with the vent is this one is really hard to get to with gloves. It's also flimsy. Like, I don't think that switch is built very well. This one's great. That one works like it should. This one's also easy to get to. It works like it should. However, when you take the peak off, and I know the peak is meant to come off because of how easy it is to change out or remove, the hole on top is completely exposed and the switch is useless. It needs a plug to hold up that vent because now without the peak, I can't really close this as a vent if I want to. That's not really a big problem, but considering I'm going to use this helmet a lot in the winter, that is a problem. I really think this helmet is going to excel for winter use. I'm actually really excited. Last winters have been hard. There's always fogging up of the visor. That's the main thing. So we'd always have to crack this open, breathe like downwards, put my upper lip out so the air would go down and wouldn't fog up my visor, but it's not doing that. That is already super exciting to me. And I mentioned that it feels like a really well encapsulated environment. It comes with a chin guard, which I think will help a little bit. I think this thing's going to do a really good job of keeping me warm. I kind of went over the fact that it does a good job of keeping wind out. I think it does the best job of holding out wind. So it's going to keep the cold out and keep the heat in. That's not to say this helmet is very hot, but I do have helmets that get more air than this one. Despite the fact how much I love my other 2 helmets, this one excels, or I think it will excel, for winter use. I can't say that because it's not winter yet, but I do intend to use this and I'm pretty confident it's going to do a great job. I realized I went over the visor mechanism and how easy it is to take off and replace. The reason it's a good thing for it to be easily replaceable is because in the wintertime I'm going to want to clean it a lot. In the wintertime, lots of dust or sand or salt gets on top of and behind the visor, so it gets really foggy and disgusting. And so what you have to do is take the visor off and wipe the inside. This is very easy to take off and put on. I don't think that's what this helmet's made for, but compared to the helmets that I've owned, this one excels. It excels for winter use, and that is exactly what I'm going to use it for. Another small con is that I like having my cameras on top of my helmets, but it's basically impossible with this one because if the peak's not in the way, if you take it off, there's no level surface for you to put the camera on, so it has to be on the side. That is like the smallest con. That's hardly a big deal. It still works. You put it on the side, there you go. But if I could, I would rather have it on top. I have another con. I don't mean to crap on this helmet. I actually really like it. I'm just thinking about things to pick at it. This helmet is not a cheap helmet. It's a Shoei for one. This helmet is about $500, I think. That makes it the most expensive helmet I've ever owned. I know that a lot of you guys are new riders, so as far as who I'd recommend this helmet to, I would not recommend this to a new person unless you have a lot of money to put aside for a good helmet. You can live with a cheaper helmet, but in the end, you get what you pay for, and if you can pay for a better piece of gear at the start, it's going to be a service to you. Alright guys, I hope you liked this review. I hope it was at least a little bit informative. Thanks for watching guys, I'm going home fast. I'll see you later. Bye.